This is all planned out. All planned out. And Bill Gates gets up there and giggles about his death panels because he's the humanitarian. And our next guest has done a lot of work exposing that. You know, I want to cover the waterfront with him today. You can disagree with some of their solutions. And, you know, the Washington Post has called them extremely right-wing. Other media has called them Marxist. I really think the best way to describe them is complex, and I want to get Jeff Steinberg's own view on themselves, but we had Lyndon LaRouche on last week, so why not have Jeff Steinberg on this week? He's been the director of counterintelligence for News Weekly magazine, EIR, founded by Lyndon LaRouche in '77. He's an investigative journalist with over 25 years. Steinberg has written and presented lectures on subjects ranging from who runs the international dope and weapons cartels, and over the years I've just found out their analysis is spot on. To whom is behind the cover-up of Princess Diana's murder, and most recently, who authored 9/11. He also has an in-depth knowledge of the cover-up of President John F. Kennedy's assassination. I want to talk about all of this, and developed extensive knowledge on the inner workings of the Justice Department, FBI, and DEA. In recent years, Steinberg has directed a number of special investigative projects for EIR, resulting in a series of feature packages on subjects such as the coming fall of the House of Windsor, would President Bob Dole, well, it just goes on from there, over some of his famous treatises. He broke down Zbigniew Brzezinski, and September 11th, LaRouchePAC.com or LaRouchePub.com are the websites. And I want to cover the waterfront here with Jeffrey Steinberg. But Jeff, first, in 2002, as you know, over 1,000 pages of IMF World Bank documents got released the week after Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz left. He says he didn't release them, wink, wink. And Greg Palast put them out, of course. And in there, they admit the 100-point-plus plan was 112 points of how they go in, buy off politicians, get them in debt, have them sign over the nation's real estate and infrastructure. Then the corrupt dictator leaves. They implode the country, cause rioting, bring in austerity, which causes more rioting, more austerity, selling off the infrastructure. The country never gets out of debt. It's all fraudulent. But that now they were going to do it to the first world nations, and now they've done it. And admittedly, most of the debt in Iceland, in Ireland, in Greece, in Portugal is not owed by the people. On record, in most cases, over 90%, some it's down in the low 80s, is owed in Ponzi schemes, in derivatives, as you know, the banksters created, the big six mega banks, with the Queen of England and the Netherlands and the Rothschilds and Rockefellers sitting high atop it openly. And how painful is it for you to know this for 30-plus years, to speak about it, write about it, to now watching it all come to a head as they globally conquer everyone out of their fraud, out of their Ponzi schemes, calling for a Bank of the World to pay our carbon and VAT taxes to, and to see them implode countries, literally shut off the social services, toilet paper in government buildings in New York, you know, all of this, knowing that it's a black hole of debt designed to reduce us to absolute slaves. And now it's in the news today. Financial Times of London, you name it. It's up at drudgereport.com, Infowars.com as well. It's all up there today where they say, oh, guess what? We need another bailout now or Europe will collapse. And then you give them another bailout and then it'll collapse, and another and another and another. And the same threats we saw here 3 years ago when Henry Paulson threatened martial law, they did the same thing in Europe. Tanks in the streets, blood, martial law. Jeffrey Steinberg, what is going on here? When is this going to end?
It's going to end when the Ponzi scheme is burst, when an alternative policy is put in place, and I think that we're a lot closer to accomplishing that, particularly here in the United States, than a lot of people think. Look, you put the fundamental issue on the table. For decades and decades, we cataloged and documented the absolute genocidal looting of the developing sector, whether it's Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, exactly what you said, creating a debt bubble, going for asset stripping, depriving the countries of their basic livelihood, resulting in massive population reduction, all on their agenda. Now they're trying to do it in the first world. They're trying to do it in Europe, and of course they're trying to do it here in the United States with the policies that really began with particularly when Greenspan came in as chairman of the Fed, and on behalf of J.P. Morgan, broke up the whole Glass-Steagall system that had hamstrung the banks from looting the savings of households and wiping out any kind of credit for investment in the real economy. So now we're at the point where in the House of Representatives, you have a Glass-Steagall reinstatement bill before the legislature. It's H.R. 1489. It's got about 20 co-sponsors now, and our perspective is to overwhelm the White House by having the majority of members of the House of Representatives co-sponsoring the bill to where people like Barney Frank can't dodge the bullet and prevent it from coming up to a debate and vote on the floor of the House. Same thing in the Senate. We're expecting any day now a Senate version pretty much identical to the captor bill. This is a flank to bankrupt Wall Street. This is not just simply a way of reconstituting commercial banking. Like a chargeback of an unauthorized charge on your credit card, we're going to charge back at least $17 trillion in gambling debt accrued by the big Wall Street banks and by some of their European friends, particularly in the Inter-Alpha group of Lord Jacob Rothschild.
Jeffrey, stop right there, because I want you to get into Rothschild and all that in more detail, but I don't want to just glaze over the important things you're saying. They admit that customer service banks, lending banks, private sector banks are disappearing. They're being gobbled up by the regulators, run by the big six banks who put their people into all the main positions of power. They admit that the customer service level of banks and actual lending for the economy is shutting down all over the world, despite them being flush with banker bailouts, and that they're laying people off at banks everywhere. I mean, this is a planned implosion. This is economic genocide.
That's exactly right. And we're going to make sure that it doesn't succeed. And that's the fight that we're in right now. You've got a mood in the country where there is an absolute sense of betrayal by this president, by Wall Street. And we've been at public meetings all over the United States. The 4th of July recess was a perfect opportunity. The Progressive Caucus had a series of policy forums. We were in Milwaukee and Detroit and Harlem and New York City. And when our people got up, our candidates in particular, and raised the issue of Glass-Steagall and bankrupting Wall Street and reconstituting the viable commercial banks that are needed to protect depositors' savings, to issue credits into the real economy.
Tell us what the people did when you said that when we come back. Jeff Steinberg's our guest. I'm Alex Jones. All right, we've got the head of counterintelligence at EIR, Executive Intelligence Review, Jeffrey Steinberg. This is a short segment, long segment coming up. I'll probably keep him 5 minutes in the next hour because I got him on a bit late. He's joining us via video Skype, connecting, so you can watch him streaming live at prisonplanet.tv. If you're over there, prisonplanet.tv. Okay, going back to Jeffrey Steinberg, I want to get into a host of other issues to really look at who these people are, but you were getting up to the point of speeches all over the country with your organization, and when you talked about Glass-Steagall, going after the banksters, the response you got.
It was electric. Standing ovation, and in all three instances that I'm referring to, there were several members of Congress on the podium who were co-sponsors, including in one instance Marcy Kaptur herself, and there were other members of Congress who had not yet signed on, and universally every one of them, when they saw the reaction, said, count me in, I'm on board, and we're holding their feet to the fire. We're going to see what happens by the middle of this week. We expect to see all of those people now on as signatories. We're going for the jugular against Wall Street at a moment when they are most vulnerable. They're hated by the American people. The bailout is despised. Geithner is in there knowing that another $1 trillion bailout is going to be needed to save the big six before the end of this year, and there's no political way that that's going to be tolerated. In Europe, you've got literally nonstop rioting in the streets of Athens because people are just completely fed up with the sellout of their government and the fact that Maastricht and the Lisbon Treaty is a banker's dictatorship straitjacket on them. This is not going to go down in Europe, but in particular in the United States. We have a history, we have a constitution, and we have a remedy for solving this problem. We're going to basically take that $17 trillion in bailout money and charge it back to the brokerage houses and insurance companies and reestablish a full wall of separation so that commercial banks do what they're supposed to do. Take deposits and issue loans to businesses, home loans for mortgages, and let these gamblers basically choke to death on their own bad debt.
Well, what is their end-game plan? We've seen what they've done in the third world, but attempting this in the West, they've gotten away with it so far while imploding society. I mean, all the indicators, all the data is coming in on the societal meters and control panel here. The instrumentation shows we are in a serious crisis, and they really think they're just going to run implosion after implosion, looting and stripping after stripping, with more looting on top, selling us that they're the good guys, and anybody that criticizes the private Federal Reserve is some type of terrorist. That's not going to hold water. I mean, more and more the hue and cry is, get out the guillotines.
That's right. Remember the attitude of Percy Shelley. He said, we are many, they are few. He was talking about the oligarchy, and it's absolutely true at this moment. They selected Obama as their instrument. They intend to try to go for some sort of pretext for dictatorship, but the odds of them succeeding are very slim. The real key question is not whether or not there's going to be a revolt. There is a revolt already, and it's going to get much, much louder and much nastier. The question is, will there be an alternative policy, or will the anger spill over into just uncontrolled chaos, in which case their agenda, as you mentioned earlier, of massive population reduction is what's going to happen? That's the key question. Is there leadership? Is there a policy to bring about an economic recovery to basically cast off this completely illegal parasitical gambling debt from the backs of average citizens? And will we go back to a credit system based on commercial banking, federal credit to be issued through the private banking system for viable projects to create jobs and rebuild our economy, starting with basic infrastructure?
But then meanwhile, the banksters fund a lot of phony libertarian groups, and I see myself as a real constitutionalist / libertarian, but I don't like labels. You know, they're too simplistic. But meanwhile, they finance all this, quote, free market stuff that, oh, you can't finance any public works projects because that's socialism. Well, what is it when you give tens of trillions to offshore banks that don't pay taxes? I mean, I'm against socialism, but, I mean, if you're going to have government projects, then it should be the people. But then I get back to, if we're going to have bailout money, or we're going to print money, at least issue it to small businesses. How about that? How about just have lending? How about the currency be controlled by the government and the Congress as it's supposed to, as the founder said? Stay there, Jeff.